Greetings, all of you across the globe. Lotus Dawn here. And today, the 1212 Gateway is a very, very powerful gateway with the sun, which represents the soul, Venus, the divine goddess, and Mars, the divine masculine, coming together in Ophiuchus, the 13th sign. And the energy of this is sparking sacred memory, sacred awareness, love, light, and the depth and intensity of this journey. So let me share screen. Let's go up to the actual sky and take a look at this powerful gateway that numerologically adds up to 6, which is the number of love. It is the number of beauty. It is the number of the divine feminine. And as we take a look here at the actual sky, we see that the sun is currently in Ophiuchus, which is the 13th sign. It's the sign of energy mastery. It's the sign of the divine, hidden, secret, sacred secrets of our divinity, of reality that we have not fully acknowledged, we have not fully claimed. And it is a time on the earth where we are beginning to take back and claim the secret, sacred knowledge, not only from within, but the sacred knowledge of our history, of what has come before. So join me on this journey. What's really spectacular is that today is actually Mary Day. It is a day for remembering the sacred gospel of Mary, Mother Mary, and I guess we could also say Mary Magdalene. And I think this is so interesting because when I tune into the energy of Ophiuchus, to me, this is so fascinating. In the story of Ophiuchus, of course, was that he was the son of Apollo, the sun god. He was a man who enacted miracles. He actually could bring people back from the dead. And tonight, in between Venus and Mars, Venus representing the divine feminine, Mars representing the divine masculine, Sun representing the soul. And so in many great traditions, people think of Ophiuchus as carrying a similar symbology as Jesus, with the ability to call in miracles, to enact miracles, to create divinity, to connect us to our hearts. And what's even more fascinating is that when you add Ophiuchus, the 13th sign of the zodiac, to the 12 signs of the zodiacal wheel, you actually get the number 13. And 13, if you go back to the Last Supper, which has all of the 12 apostles and Jesus, and there's someone else there, isn't there? Mary Magdalene. And so for those of you who've never heard much about this, this might be quite a revealing video. And so one of the big revelations I've been having recently, especially with the sun, Venus, and Mars being in Ophiuchus, the sign of energy mastery, which Jesus, right, he learned to not only bring people back from the dead, but he also rose from the dead. And so it's very interesting to me that Ophiuchus used to be on the zodiacal wheel in the Babylonian era and yet was cut off as they went forward, which basically would leave just the 12 disciples. And so who was the missing disciple? Who was the missing person from this feast? Some people say the missing person has been Mary Magdalene, right? And the role that Mary Magdalene played in the teachings of Jesus. And so in the Bible, Mary Magdalene was portrayed as a prostitute, as a sinner, as a woman who Jesus took pity on and then allowed to follow him. But what is emerging as we look back in history is that more than likely Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. She was a student. She was a woman who then became a partner who became a lover, and that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were actually married. They actually had children. They actually have physical descendants that became the foundation of the Merovingian line in France. And if you look at this painting, it's just incredible. This is such an ancient, famous painting, Leonardo da Vinci. And if you look really close, this woman here, they say that these are the Jesus and the 12 disciples. But if you look at all of the other people, they look like men. But if you look closer at this figure here, that is a very feminine being compared to all of these others. And they seem to be very connected. And it's interesting because there's actually a V created between the two of them, representing, right? What is V? What could that relate to? The divine chalice. And so many of us have heard, the search for the Holy Grail, and it's a very biblical concept, and it's never been found. Well, according to many, the Holy Grail is actually symbolic and representative of the relationship between Mary Magdalene and Jeshua, and that the Holy Grail was actually her womb. Yeah? And so this story is so deep and so profound, and that I had to get on here and talk about it. And so let's dive into, I found some really great videos that talk about this early relationship between Mary Magdalene and Jesus. And so the story in a nutshell goes that Mary Magdalene was the divine essence of the divine feminine, and that when she encountered Jeshua, or Jesus, he was the divine masculine expression of God, which is the active, assertive voice that goes out into the world, and that she was the reflexive, receiving, the feminine, for those teachings, and that it was between the two of them that he was able to achieve his divine work, his divine fulfillment, his ascension, if you will. And so I would like to share with you a little bit more about this story. I found a really great video site recently that goes very deep into Mary Magdalene and Jeshua, and this story of their divine union, of their connection. And today being Mary Day, I just thought, gosh, what an incredible day to share this with all of you. Because if you think about how the story of Mary Magdalene and Jeshua has impacted the feminine consciousness, right? That the most powerful man in history, Jesus, was portrayed as being single, that he never had a wife or a family, and that Mary Magdalene was a penitent seeking salvation, and not an equal partner who actually, after the passing of Christ, he wanted her to take his work to the people. But the other disciples didn't understand this, and so she actually fled Jerusalem. She fled Israel, and she went to France. And that's where this whole focus on Mary Magdalene in the south of France, that she had a child with Jeshua, Sarah, and that Sarah was the ancestor to many in the Merovingian line of France, who then became the royalty. And in fact, that the story of the Cathars, who are a spiritual movement in France, being persecuted by the Catholic Church, was actually being done by the Catholic Church to clear out the memory, the story, the knowledge, and the descendants from Jeshua and Mary Magdalene, and the worship of the divine feminine energy that Mary Magdalene's teachings and her presence brought in. So I'm going to share screen with you, and we're just going to watch this video, a couple videos here, to kind of dive into this energy. And my purpose for this is that as I've studied the relationship between Jeshua and Mary Magdalene, that she was his partner, that she was his divine counterpart, that they walked the path together, that they utilized divine sexuality, energy mastery to raise the energy of the Kundalini, which is often called the snake. And right now we have the Sun, Venus, and Mars all in Ophiuchus, which is the Snake Tamer. It's very, very powerful energy. So join me to dive into the energy of Mary Magdalene and Jeshua, the divine union, and the return of Mary Magdalene to our awareness as a culture, as a society, to the return of the union between men and women, the divine balance. Very exciting. And so in many great traditions, people think of Ophiuchus as carrying a similar symbology as Jesus, with the ability to call in miracles, to enact miracles, to create divinity. Give me 1 minute here. What's even more fascinating is that when you add Ophiuchus, the 13th sign of the zodiac, to the 12 signs of the zodiacal wheel, you actually... Okay. I guess when something's really good, we have a nice dramatic pause here. Okay. Are you ready? Let's dive in. This is going to be powerful energy. Okay, here we go.
What if Jesus and Mary Magdalene met long before the world was ready to understand them? What if that single meeting, quiet, unrecorded, almost invisible, was the most powerful moment in all of human history? Not because of what was said, but because of what was remembered. Imagine it, the Son of Man walking the dusty roads of Galilee, carrying the weight of heaven in his silence. And a woman, not fallen, not sinful, but luminous, carrying the memory of a truth the world had forgotten. When their eyes met, something ancient stirred. It wasn't romance, it wasn't doctrine. It was recognition, soul recognizing soul, the divine meeting its reflection in human form. And that was the moment the balance returned. The day when heaven realized it needed the language of earth, and wisdom, dressed as a woman, looked into the face of love and said, "I remember you." But that truth was too vast for empires, too liberating for hierarchies. So it was buried, wrapped in silence, rewritten into shadows. In this video,
So their meeting was the spark of divine love. It was the remembrance of souls who had been on a journey before. And how many of you can relate to moments in your life where you have met someone that you've known, that you've walked with before? And so their coming together was that spark of divine remembrance. It was the union of two opposites, the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And someone wrote in the comments, when do you think the 1212 portal is over? That's a great question, because here on the Pacific Coast in California, I have about 30 minutes of the day. Okay, so let's just say there's 30 minutes remaining here for me in California for that particular flavor. However, come take a look with me here. We are approaching the apex of the 1212 portal. So this is not it, my friends. This is just the opening of the gateway. And what is that gateway? Well, come take a look with me here. The gateway is the alignment of the sun with the galactic center, which Mars, you see all this white here, that is the entrance of the galactic center. And so Mars right now is exactly conjuncted. The divine masculine is standing in the galactic center. And what is the galactic center? The galactic center is the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and it is said to be home to 4 super massive black holes that were the remains of 4 supermassive stars. And I often wonder, were they actually really planets? And so the reason that this 1212 gateway is just beginning is because the sun has just entered into conjunction or activation of the galactic center. And you can think of the galactic center as the greatest yin, right? If it has supermassive black holes, yin is darkness, it's blackness, it's the fertile soil from which all of life comes from. And if you think about Ophiuchus energy, Ophiuchus energy is all about tending to the deep mysteries of life. Ophiuchus energy is mystery. It is the secret, sacred things that we learn when we go within, right? And so as the sun approaches conjunction with the galactic center, which when will that be happening? That will be happening on December 18th. And so we are literally building up to the union of the light and the dark. Okay, so when the sun, which is the greatest light, aligns to the galactic center, we are literally aligning to the greatest dark. Okay, and so the greatest light is the greatest yang, which could be the divine masculine, and the greatest dark is the greatest yin, which could be the divine feminine. And so today we have the planet Mars, which is the divine masculine, and we have the planet Venus, which is the divine feminine, on either side of the sun, which represents the soul. And it's the opening of the gateway. And today's number adds up to 6, which numerologically is all about the heart, and it's all about feminine energy. And as we approach the 21st of December, right, which they say is the polarity to the 1212 gateway, we are going to be approaching both a new moon aligning with Ophiuchus, the galactic center, and it will be bringing together the sun and the moon, which is the divine feminine and the divine masculine, in the sign of Ophiuchus, the 13th sign, which is ruled by Chiron. It relates to I would imagine that it relates to the higher chakras connecting to the divine. It is related to ether, the element. It is a very magical, mysterious number or sign that relates to alchemy, transmutation, transformation. You can see, if you think about the Kundalini energy representing 2 snakes coiling up the spine to create enlightenment, to create expansion. And so we are literally traveling through a gateway where we're being reminded of, we're being awakened to our ancient memories, where we had experiences where we connected with divinity. How many of you remember being a sacred initiate, being a sacred being where you learned how to focus, how to connect to, how to activate your inner energy body to actually transmute and shift energy? How many of you remember being students of alchemy? Students who were in ancient Egypt, students who were in the Taoist temples. This is the sacred knowledge that Ophiuchus represents. And when the sun and all these planets are aligning to and connecting to this energy, we are being awakened. The memories, the awarenesses are coming to the light. Ophiuchus is the ether. What is the ether? It is all the knowledge, all the space. It is the Akashic record. And so having so many planets in the sign of Ophiuchus right now, we are being tapped in to the sacred knowledge of all of creation. Well, how many of you agree that's a lot? That's a lot of light. That's a lot of awareness. When typically that gateway, that's why I call Ophiuchus the guardian of the galactic center. Do you think that knowledge, that everyone can handle it? No, not at all. And so we have to be responsible if we are on the path of awakening, that we may be having awarenesses that other people simply can't understand right now. Because basically, around the beginning of December, when the sun enters Ophiuchus, it begins to get the closest to the Galactic Center is all year. And so it gets the closest to the portal, what I call the womb of creation, the Akashic record, the Akashic library, where all information is stored. And this is substantiated by the fact that the ancient Mayans actually described the constellation of Ophiuchus as their ancient portal to their beyond world, right? The great afterlife, the entranceway to their great afterlife, right? Like heaven, the entranceway to heaven located in the constellation of Ophiuchus. They named it that. And so right now we stand with the sun, with Venus, with Mars, activating that great portal, heading into a new moon on December 19th, right at the time of the solstice. And so this is literally the most powerful manifestation portal of all of 2025. Why? When is it the most powerful time to set intentions? At the time of the new moon. When the energy is the most yin, it is the most internal. And so that's a monthly cycle that the moon follows. But the sun also has a manifestation cycle. And this is the time of the year when it's closest to the most yin point, which is the Galactic Center, which is home to 4 supermassive black holes. And so because the sun is approaching exact alignment, the closest it will get for the entire year, on December 18th, 19th, 20th, at the time of the new moon, at the time of the solstice, we are literally walking into the most powerful time of the year to set intentions. Will it be the time where we see the actual physical manifestation? Awesome. Welcome back, everyone. I got knocked off for a minute when I was talking about when does creation start? Does creation start when we hold the manifestation in our hands, or does creation start before that? And I was just about to say, with all this force and energy when I got shut off here, that we are creators and that we are creating all of the time. And so when does manifestation start? It starts when we get the dream. It starts when we get the desire. It starts when we set the intention. When we just tune in and we go, oh, I know what I want. That is when the manifestation cycle begins. So this is the most powerful time of the year to set your intentions. And it just so happens that we are in the time of the year right before the new year. So it's a really good time. Things are wrapping up. We might be being more internal. It's a great time to dream, to watch movies, to set intentions. And next week at the time of the new moon, my partner and I lead a monthly membership. We do energy clearing once a week, every Monday night at 6 p.m. And we also do new moon and full moon astrology energy clearing calls. And so if you would like to join our membership, you can just comment in the chat and I can get you a link. But next week for our membership, we are going to be hosting a new moon intention setting call with an astrological deep dive and finding out what your intention is. What intention do you want to set? Where in your astrology chart does Ophiuchus land? Because when this new moon comes in, this is the area of your life that you're going to want to set your intentions. This is such a powerful, powerful time. Okay. So, ancient knowledge, ancient secrets. That's what Ophiuchus is reminding us of, is bringing us into.
Egypt that the orgasm was the key to eternal life, and that through the proper understanding and use of one's bioenergetic field, a person can increase their life force energy, making you stronger, more alive, and more conscious. And perhaps, if you believe the ancient Egyptians, it may lead you into spiritual immortality. It was thought that sex energy was directly linked to the activation of the chakra system, and more specifically, the heart chakra. A chakra is defined as an energy vortex that is connected to the entire human energy field and influences the nervous and endocrine systems. Sex, and specifically the orgasm, therefore, is more than just something that allows procreation, and under the right conditions, is said to allow a person to not only attain enlightenment or higher consciousness, but actually subjectively experience other worlds beyond this dimensional plane of existence.
It's not only Egyptian Tantra that uses this method. It's known also by yoga, for example, doing Kundalini yoga. I'm doing a lot of Kundalini yoga by Yogi Bhajan, for example.
Or any other practice. So Ophiuchus is all about us tapping into the sacred secret practices of the esoteric and the ancient. And some of that, of course, was sexual magic, sexual alchemy. The Taoists taught how to shift and create the rainbow light body. And some say that the original symbol of constellation was a woman wrestling with a giant serpent. And so some might say that the symbol of Ophiuchus really, the fact that it was cut off of the constellational wheel and just have 12 symbols for thousands of years, could relate to the cutting off of Mary Magdalene as being the heir to the teachings that Jesus taught, that actually she was next in line to go out into the world and share this work of love, right? Jesus taught love, and that Mary Magdalene was the teacher and the sharer of that information. Some say that Ophiuchus represents the restoring of the divine feminine. The designation of the serpent bearer as male ignored the female Pythoness Officiana. Her role as the 13th constellation reminds us of the natural 13 lunar months, which is what women have. We have 13 moons per cycle, right? 13 moons per year. And so if we follow that cycle, we actually align to the natural rhythm of women. And if you look at a turtle's back, you'll actually see that the turtle has 13 humps. And so it relates to the cycles of the moon. Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Someone says Lilith in Scorpio delves into these things too. And I would say that the relationship between Scorpio and Ophiuchus is very close. I think what I've come to feel with the difference between Scorpio energy and Ophiuchus is that Scorpio energy is about facing the shadow. It's about transformation. It's about alchemy. But the difference between Scorpio and Ophiuchus is that Scorpio is still going through the cycles of death and rebirth, whereas when you get into Ophiuchus, you start to graduate and you become then an energy master. You begin to learn how to master your energy and rise above it, and to tame the human passions and the ups and downs to be able to transmute. And so that's one reason that Mary Magdalene and Jeshua are such a powerful example to learn from, is because they were a divine example of utilizing sacred sexuality. Supposedly they were married and had children, and they used the ancient secret teachings of sexual alchemy to assist Jeshua on transmuting his energy, raising his energy up, so that then he could achieve the miracles and the gifts that allowed him to become the master that we know of today. Please share in the comments your ahas, any cognitions you're having, any questions. Please like, follow, and subscribe, because all of your involvement allows this message and this information to get out to more people. If you think this is valuable, if you think it would be helpful for more people to know about the sacred story of Jeshua and Mary Magdalene, and how she was not a prostitute. In fact, she was a divine partner to Jesus. And imagine seeing Jeshua as having been a husband and a father and a partner to a woman is a very different energy than seeing him as, simply like a monk, right? It's a very, very different energy. So I have a couple more videos I want to share with you around the energy, the sacred energy of Mary Magdalene. And let's see here. Perfect. Okay, here we go. And definitely share in the chat if you have any ahas, any cognitions, anything you'd like to share, or any questions. Okay, great. Here we go.
What if the greatest sin ever committed was not the fall of man, but the silencing of a woman who understood love better than heaven itself? For centuries, we've been taught that desire must be tamed, that purity demands suppression, that holiness begins where passion ends. But what if this belief, the one shaping every sermon, every shame, every forbidden thought, was built on a lie, buried beneath the altar of history? They called her a sinner, they called her unworthy. Yet among all who followed him, she was the one who saw. She was the first to recognize the resurrected Christ, when even the apostles could not. And she carried in her heart a teaching that could have transformed the world, a teaching so dangerous, it was erased, edited, and hidden for nearly 2,000 years. This is not just a story about Mary Magdalene, it's a story about you, about every soul who has ever felt torn between love and faith, desire and devotion, spirit and flesh. Because the Gospel of Mary, the one they buried, holds a key that shatters this illusion. It whispers that sin was never the separation from God, but the forgetting of our own divine essence. And if you listen carefully tonight, you will remember. You'll see why her words threatened empires. You'll understand why her voice was silenced. And you'll feel, perhaps for the first time, that sacred love was never meant to be forbidden. Stay until the end, for what follows may rewrite everything you've been taught about love, sin, and salvation itself.
Okay, so this is deep, you guys. This is very, very deep. And so I want to invite you to tune into what would it mean if Jeshua and Mary Magdalene were married, if they had children, and if Mary Magdalene was his divine partner and the person designated to carry the teachings of Jesus forward. What would that mean for women? What would that mean for religion? What would that mean for the relationship between us and the church and history? Let's check it out.
They tried to bury her name beneath centuries of dust. But like a flame hidden under the ruins, Mary Magdalene refused to die. History remembers her as a repentant sinner, the woman who wept at Jesus' feet, her tears washing away his pain and her own shame. But the truth is far more luminous and far more dangerous. Mary was not a prostitute, not a fallen woman saved by mercy. She was a teacher of the inner path, a woman of profound understanding, chosen to walk beside Jesus, not as a servant, but as his equal in spirit. In the early centuries, followers knew her differently. She was Miriam of Magdala, the apostle to the apostles. In several ancient texts, she is described as the one who comprehended the deeper mysteries that others could not, the one Jesus loved more than the rest. But power trembles before a woman who knows truth. When men began building walls around what should have been light, her presence became inconvenient. Her wisdom, her closeness to the divine, challenged the hierarchy that sought control. So they rewrote her story. They merged her with others. The unnamed sinner, the woman with the alabaster jar, the possessed woman, from whom 7 demons were cast out. Layer upon layer, her image was blurred until the teacher became the temptress, and the voice of wisdom became a whisper of shame. And yet, her essence survived. In art, she was painted weeping. In legend, she wandered in exile. But in truth, she never vanished. Her message lived in secret circles, in whispers between seekers who felt something sacred had been stolen. Mary Magdalene was not erased. She was hidden in plain sight, waiting for an age when love could be seen not as sin, but as the doorway back to the divine. For centuries, her voice was thought lost forever, silenced beneath layers of doctrine and dust. Until one winter's day in 1896, in a forgotten marketplace in Cairo.
Wow. So, for thousands of years, the voice of this great teacher, of a divine feminine teacher. What is the importance of that as women? And why do I even share about this on this 1212 portal? We are going through an awakening on the planet, an awakening of our awareness, an awakening of our gifts, an awakening of our self-worth. How many women out there have ever felt some sort of echo of feeling repressed or suppressed or shame? How many have felt something like the witches, I forget what they call it, but that sense of there's something blocking me from sharing my gifts with the world as a woman? Just like the story of Mary Magdalene, where her gifts were silenced by history. And so my hope is that tonight on this the last minutes of 1212 here on the Pacific Coast, as we get ready for the huge expression of this opening of the 1212 portal around the 21st of December with the new moon on the 19th, my hope is to assist you all in awakening the remembrance of your own divinity, the remembrance of your own self-love, the awareness and remembrance of your self-worth, that as divine feminine beings, we are equal. There is a balance between the feminine and the masculine, that there isn't one higher or lower. We are the perfect match in all ways. Okay, so let's continue on here. Let's dive deeper. I'm so excited to see what else we're going to discover here. And please share in the comments any cognitions, any questions. What is this like to learn about? I'd love to hear what your experience is like. Here we go.
A fragile papyrus, written in Coptic script, containing words the world was never meant to hear. It was called the Gospel of Mary, not the Gospel of John or Peter or Luke, but hers, a woman's gospel. And within its broken pages lay teachings that could ignite the sleeping soul of humanity. Unlike the familiar Gospels, this one does not begin with miracles or parables. It begins after the resurrection, after the veil between heaven and earth has been lifted. The disciples, lost and frightened, ask Jesus how to continue after his departure. And it is Mary who steps forward to remind them of his secret teaching. In the surviving pages, she speaks of visions, revelations, where the soul ascends through the realms of illusion, stripping away fear and desire, until only divine awareness remains. She says that sin is not what we do, but what we forget. That redemption is not bought through suffering, but through remembering who we truly are. Imagine the power of such a message in an age ruled by fear. A teaching that needs no temple, no priest, no mediator. A path that leads directly inward, into the sacred silence where God and soul are one. For early seekers, this was gnosis, not belief but knowing. It meant that salvation was not something to be earned, but something to be realized. But to those building a religion of obedience and hierarchy, this gospel was dangerous. It dismantled control, disarmed fear, and elevated a woman, the one the teacher trusted most. So, it vanished. For nearly 1,500 years, her words slept in silence, until fragments were found in the sands of Egypt, whispering through time. Do not lay down any law, other than what I have appointed you, and do not give a law like the lawgiver, lest you be constrained by it. Mary's gospel was never lost. It was waiting for the moment when humanity would be ready to listen.
Wow. Imagine a world where women and men walked equal, side by side, and where our history, our memory of these great ascended beings like Jesus and Mary Magdalene actually carried the truth. Let's continue.
It begins in the quiet before dawn. The stone has been rolled away. The air still carries the scent of myrrh and grief. And there, standing alone by the tomb, is Mary. Her heart trembles between despair and devotion. The teacher, the one who saw her not as sinner but as soul, is gone. And then, a voice calls her name, Mary. Not a title, not a command, just her name, spoken with the tenderness that awakens the sleeping spirit. She turns, and there he stands. Not a ghost, not a vision, but the living essence of love itself, radiant beyond flesh. He says, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended." A message that would echo through eternity. Because what he gave her next was not comfort, but revelation. In the Gospel of Mary, after his resurrection, Jesus entrusts her with teachings the others were not ready to receive. He speaks of the soul's journey, the crossing through realms of attachment and fear. He reveals that the true resurrection is not of the body, but of consciousness, the awakening of divine awareness while still alive. When Mary tells the others, they do not believe her. Peter, the bold and fiery disciple, challenges her. Did he really speak with a woman, secretly and apart from us? are we to turn and all listen to her? And Mary, calm and unbroken, replies, "Do you believe that I invented this of myself, or that I am lying about our teacher?" In that moment, the silence between them becomes heavier than words, because beneath their disbelief lies fear, not of her, but of what she represents. A woman who saw the risen light, who understood the divine not as distant, but as within. That was the true revolution. Jesus teaching Mary, and Mary teaching the world, that divinity was not bound by gender, hierarchy, or law. It was alive, breathing in every soul that dared to look inward. And that truth, that love was not sin, that spirit was not separate, was too powerful to let live.
Wow. Just tuning into, if you think about the Christian church, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Christian church and the doctrine that they carried, that you must, that heaven, right, you can only achieve heaven after you die. And yet what Mary Magdalene brought back, her teachings from Jeshua after his rising, was that we can create the kingdom of heaven in life, and that it's through transcending our fear and transcending our negative emotions, right? That the kingdom of heaven is right here and now, that we have the capacity to create that while we are still here. If you're enjoying this, please share in the chat if you're having any awarenesses. I'd love to hear about them. And I'm going to keep sharing this video because I think it's so profound and such a gift for all of us to get to dive deep on this tonight, on this sacred celebration of Mary, both the mother of Christ and Mary Magdalene. Okay, let's try that again. This must be really powerful, what we're about to hear.
The Gospel of Mary is not a tale meant to be read. It is a mirror meant to be remembered. Every line is a key, every symbol a doorway to inner revelation. Unlike the outer doctrines that worship a God above, Mary's words turn the seeker inward into the sacred temple of consciousness itself. She speaks of the soul's journey through 7 powers, or 7 veils of illusion, which bind humanity in forgetfulness. Each power is not a demon outside us, but a force within us, the subtle chains that keep the divine spark asleep. The soul answered, "What binds me has been slain, and what turned me has been overcome." Mary describes the soul ascending through these 7 powers, realms of ignorance, desire, darkness, craving, false peace, envy, and wrath. Each time, the soul confronts a shadow within, and by understanding, it breaks free. No savior is required, no external law, only awareness, the remembrance of who you already are. This is the esoteric heart of the gospel, the secret Jesus shared with her alone. That heaven is not a distant realm, but a state of awakened perception. That the kingdom of God is not reached by dying, but by waking up while still alive. In modern language, Mary's path mirrors what mystics across time have taught. The alchemy of transforming fear into wisdom, lust into love, pain into presence. The very energy the world calls sin, becomes the ladder to divine union when transmuted consciously. The Church taught that sin separates you from God. Mary taught that only ignorance does, and knowledge, gnosis, restores that unity. She dared to say, there is no sin, only forgetfulness. No hell, only blindness to light. And when one remembers, when one awakens, the divine and the human become one breath. It is this teaching, not rebellion, that terrified the institutions of her time. Because a soul who realizes its own divinity cannot be ruled. It cannot be bought, shamed, or silenced. The Gospel of Mary is the map back to yourself. A whisper through the centuries, reminding you that enlightenment was never a gift to be earned. It was a memory waiting to return.
Wow. And so here we sit with the sun, which represents the soul, in Ophiuchus, which represents the divine mysteries. It represents Jeshua and Mary Magdalene, with Venus on one side, the divine feminine, and Mars on the other, the divine masculine. And so it truly feels like having the energy, the action, and the ability to tap into the divine mystery, and Venus, the ability to connect to heart and to love, to fuel the action forwards. Wow, let's keep going. This is so powerful.
For centuries, the world feared what Mary represented, a union of spirit and sensuality, wisdom and tenderness, strength and surrender. She was living proof that enlightenment was not the privilege of men, nor the property of temples. And that changed everything. When early leaders sought to organize the faith, they needed control, order, obedience, and hierarchy. But Mary's gospel taught freedom, inner communion, that required no priest, no mediator, no sacrifice. It whispered that every soul, male or female, carried the spark of the divine. So, her teachings became a threat. At church councils, words were reshaped, meanings diluted, and her name entwined with sin. Texts that honored her were labeled heretical. The sacred feminine, once seen as the breath of creation itself, was turned into temptation, a test, a danger. And in that rewriting, humanity lost something vital: the balance of heaven and earth. The understanding that love is not weakness and desire is not corruption. They are the currents through which spirit experiences itself. For nearly 2 millennia, the voice of Mary Magdalene lay hidden, like a pearl beneath layers of dogma and shame. But truth is patient, it waits. And when the world is ready, it returns, not to destroy but to heal. Today, her gospel speaks again, not in rebellion, but in remembrance. Not to divide faith, but to restore it to its original essence. Love as the language of God. They silenced her voice once, but they could never silence what she carried. For the sacred feminine does not fade, it only waits for the hearts brave enough to listen. The sands of time could bury words, but not truth. The Gospel of Mary has risen again, not from tombs of stone, but from the silence within our hearts. Its return is not a rebellion against faith, but a remembrance of it, pure, untamed, and whole. Mary's voice calls through every soul who has ever felt guilt for loving deeply, for yearning for beauty, for sensing divinity within desire itself. She whispers that there was never sin in love, only blindness to its holiness. What was once silenced now blooms again in every seeker who dares to look inward and find the sacred feminine, the Christ within. The union of soul and spirit, heaven and earth, masculine and feminine. This is the resurrection humanity forgot. The age of silence is over. The Magdalene returns not as a myth, but as a mirror, reflecting the divine that was always yours. If this message awakened something within you,
Wow, this is one of my favorite channels that I've been watching a ton of. This is the site, her channel, or this channel is called The Esoteric Jesus. And all of the videos about Mary Magdalene and Jeshua are so profound and powerful. This awareness that true divinity lives within us, that the spark of all the things we seek are within. And that is what this 12/12 gateway leading into the new moon with Ophiuchus is asking us to remember, that the power that we seek is within, that there is nothing out there more powerful than our own source, our own divine spark, our own divine gifts. And so on this powerful opening of the portal of Ophiuchus, Sun and Ophiuchus approaching the Galactic Center, approaching what I call the womb of creation, and maybe that will make even more sense if Ophiuchus really represents Mary Magdalene and her connection to Jeshua as the divine feminine returning back to sit with the divine masculine. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like, please give me a subscribe, please comment in the chat, because that all helps me to share this work with the world. I will leave a link to the full video if you want to watch that on your own. And I just want to send so many blessings out to all of you. We are awakening as individuals and as a collective. We are awakening to the divine spark, the divine source, the inner power of who we really are. And this message, I hope it will light the fire within you to remember your own awareness and your own power. And that is something that the world has sought to take from us for thousands of years. But my friends, the divine spark of truth has returned, and we are awakening into true oneness, true connection to source. So I send you all immense love, immense prayers that you remember, discover, and align to your true gifts, your true power, your true beingness, and that together we co-create, we set intentions, and we create miracles and blessings in all of our lives. Deepest love, deepest gratitude. All of you, thank you for joining me tonight. I hope you dream deep and dream well.